Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. If you have not heard about the quarter century Trinity box, that is what we're talking about today. If you haven't heard about it, it's a new OCG product. It's nothing too crazy. It should only have 6-ish new cards, but it's really cool and Konami's transparent enough when this early on they tell us the 3 archetypes getting support in the product. Those 3 are Dragon Maid, Punk, and ORCUST. Today we're talking ORCUST specifically in terms of what they have and what I think would be cool that Konami could do to give them a significant buff. This year, really, Konami has released basically ORCUST from the ban list entirely, which is very cool because Harp Horde definitely didn't need to stay on the ban list by any means. And from here, it makes us want to sit back and take a look at what we can do, especially with ideally 2 new cards. Normally there's 6 new cards in these Christmas products every year in the OCG. 3 archetypes, 6 cards, makes sense, 2 for each. So that's what we're focusing on here. Let's dive in and let's start with ORCUST already have. I cut out the fat, I cut out the cards that I think are unplayably bad. So let's talk about what they do have. First and foremost, Girsu. And I think this may be low-key one of the most important cards you need to keep in mind. One, because we have Harp Horror, totally free now, which means just getting Harp in rotations. Like, not only is this a normal summon, a 1-card starter, yada yada yada, but the fact that if we just get Harp in rotation, Harp summons your 1-card starter from the deck. That's really crazy, right? Very good card, and he just never even, this card didn't even exist yet when the deck got its biggest bans. So the fact that it factors in does mean we have to reevaluate exactly where the deck is now that they have this card at their disposal. Really good card. ORCUST, Harp Horror, this is probably the best card in Engine for the main deck overall, just getting you access to anything. But there is some clunkiness to this card, and there's some clunkiness to this deck overall in the main deck that I think is a significant concern, and it's probably my number 1 concern. You have pieces in the extra deck, right? Galatea can get you either Babel or Crescendo, right? So you can find your way into some interruptions. You can, once you have a quick effect, you can quick effect, like, set up Ding Girsu and get, and ding your opponent on their turn and get a ton of, like, follow-up, yada, 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 right? The deck can do some cool things, but the problem is sometimes you have some really clunk hands, and that, I think, is my biggest concern. So that's what I think I'll address here, is that Harp is a really good card, and with literally any way to guarantee get it out of the hand, like, really easily, I love this card. If you cannot guarantee get it out of the hand and get it into graveyard more specifically, this card is troublesome. And all the other main deck ORCUST cards are troublesome, right? Nightmare, same thing, because Nightmare can just send Harp, so it's kind of the same thing. Skeleton, right? Awkward in hand, but you probably have to play at least 1 to cycle around. Brass. This card, I don't think this card's that good. I guess it could theoretically help with clunky hands where you have, like, these guys stuck in hand and, like, rather than sending them to grave, pull them out of the hand and then link them off. Pull them out of the hand onto the field and then link them off. This card is also a tuner. That's something to keep in mind, that, like, this is an archetype that was created with a tuner that has no synchros. It almost worries me because that's not the direction I really, like, want them to go, because it's not really a direction that I think they're necessarily, like, greatly built for. So I hope that's not where they go, but that is something to keep in mind. This is a tuner archetype with no synchro, so we'll see. And then lastly, World Legacy World 1. This is not an ORCUST card by name, but, like, if you read its effects, it's basically ORCUST. And the deck accesses it really easily, so not a problem there. Still, again, kind of similar to Symbol, probably a 1 of in most builds. Then you have Babel. Obviously, this card is broken. In fact, when this card was in its heyday, a lot of people actually wished that this card would have gotten banned, because it basically allows the deck to have any of its ORCUST effects become quick effects, whether they were originally or not. So that means Harp summoning on the opponent's turn as a quick effect. Really good. Nightmare, Foolish Burling on the opponent's turn. Really good. Reborning, Symbol Skeleton, Reborning Ding on the opponent's turn. To then non-target send a card. Very good, right? Looping Resources, the World Wand, right? Like, all these things become hard ones per turn. Even Galatea, getting you another free set for the grind game. It allowed the deck to grind really well and establish an extra interruption or 2 on top of it. Really really good. And this was at a time where we didn't have access to something like SP Little Knight. So now being able to pair this deck with like an with an IP Masquerena type board, actually you can end up with a lot of interaction and a ton of follow-up on top of it. So this card's crazy. This is the kind of card that's kind of scary. They have to be careful about card design, I would say. Like with with whatever new ORCUST cards they make, they have to be weary that this card is like really, really scary with like potentially making them too good. But, you know, they just have to know about it. Orchestrated Return, this is the only in-archetype card that like helps us a lot with that problem of unbricking in hand, right? Harp Horror and Orchestrated Nightmare, being able to just pitch one from hand and then draw two. You maintain the hand advantage while just getting that card engraved. That's really, really nice, but sometimes you don't want to play a build with enough ORCUST names where like this card is consistently live. So you're fighting consistency problems here. Like you want to play this card, but are we for sure on enough names where this card is always live? So are you ever drawing this card kind of dead because you don't have an ORCUST you want to pitch for it? Or are you overcompensating and playing too many ORCUST names that like then if you don't draw return, you are just bricking on your harps and your nightmares and your symbol skeletons, right? That's the worry there. So helpful card potentially, especially with 2 new cards on the horizon, so potentially 2 new main deck monsters that obviously make this card more and more alive. We'll have to see though. Orchestrated Einsatz, this is a card that never really saw play in this deck, but I think it is an interesting card for sure. Like just the fact that it says if your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can take an ORCUST or World Legacy monster from hand or deck and either send it to the graveyard or banish it. It's cool. You know what I mean? It doesn't do anything fully on its own, but like just activate it, right? Like just activate it. And like whether you got hand trapped to death or not, if your opponent plays at all, you are going to get to Foolish Burial, and then a lot of decks summon on your turn. You're going to get to Foolish Burial on your own turn as well. Like that is a thing. This is an interesting card, I would say, at the least. I think there's a world where this card becomes a really good one-of in the deck because you maybe just get it super freely now, right? Really, the only spell and trap targets you're usually searching are Babel and Crescendo, maybe Return sometimes, but this card could become a nice tool there as well. And then for the traps, it's basically just Crescendo. Yeah, it's just Crescendo. They have a couple other traps, but they are unplayably bad. Crescendo's crazy, though, right? Omni Negate, that banishes, and then also on a follow-up turn, it can just be banished from grave to search a Dark Machine. I love this card. This card's good. It's probably an auto one-of in the deck. Makes your boards better and much more better at playing through like board breakers and stuff. Really useful card for the deck. Then for links, Galatea, great card. Great card. It's just a link to that searches. Really good. And it doesn't even take 2 ORCUSTs, so it is somewhat generic there. Long Girsu, useful card, not crazy card. This card becomes better and better when you have like Babel up and Adam. But, you know, still a useful card, still probably one-of in the deck. ORCUST is an interesting one. This is a card that's never been really played in the deck, and I think part of that problem is just that with Galatea, the deck was just so good at like taking care of and like shuffling between Galatea and like World Legacy World Wand. You had pretty consistent ways to just keep looping the cards that end up banished. It's not like when cards get banished in this deck. Like this is a graveyard deck, but it's not like a deck where like once your cards get banished, they're gone for good. And so that's why this card never saw the light of day. Now, maybe there's a world where these 2 cards just facilitate this card at a much better level. This card's not out of this world crazy, but it does like blanket negate all the monsters on your opponent's field and make their attack and defense 0. You know, so it's interesting. It's still not perfect because it needs to be linked to monsters, but it's a card. It's a thing, I guess. I thought it was at least worth mentioning. And then Ding. Ding's crazy. This is another insane tool that the deck has where just like if you can just put any link monster on the field, even Galatea, this card basically just overlays right on top of it like Zeus, and then when it's summoned, it's either sending something or getting itself a material to then help protect your board. This card is very, very, very good. So definitely keep an eye on this card. This card's probably a 2-of in most builds. Get him in rotation, start reborning him every turn, and you just get non-target sends. Really, really strong card. Love this card. Which then there you go. There's is basically everything that ORCUST has at this point in time. There are definitely some generic cards. There were times where Armageddon Knight was played in the deck just because it could send Harp and just get the engine going that way. But now that Girsu exists, I would imagine this would just be your main normal summon, unless you really need extra names and you start playing like Rhoda and Dark Grepher and stuff like that. You could, but I don't know if that's the cleanest way to go about it. There's also random stuff like potentially combining this deck with other engines. I've already seen like Runic ORCUST be interesting, just because every Runic card is a discard basically, and a body on field. So it, especially combined with like 3 Harp Horror, 3 Orchestrated Nightmare or ORCUST Nightmare, that's already really good. But pairing it with the other ORCUST monsters isn't amazing, so you obviously want to be pairing it with the right ones. So just keep that in mind. I would say overall, if we're talking 2 cards, just 2 cards straight up, I really like a lot of the pieces the deck already has. I think between Galatea and Ding, you have 2 really good extra deck monsters that get you really good utility. Between Babel and Crescendo, you have 2 really strong like end board pieces. But I think one of the problems I do have is obviously that main deck clunkiness. That's the first thing I would say, is like some card. I don't know if it's a spell. I don't know if it's a. I almost think about something similar to Emergency, the semi-new Rescue Ace quick play spell that says like add a Rescue Ace monster or summon a Rescue Ace monster from your deck, then tribute a Rescue Ace monster. I kind of like the idea of that, except maybe, honestly, they could do almost that. If not, they could just say, even if they don't want to make it that strong of like summoning to the field straight up, they could say add an ORCUST monster from deck to hand, then send like a card from deck to hand, or an ORCUST card specifically. So that way, worst case scenario, it is just Foolish Burial for, if it is a 1-card play, because it's just basically Foolish Burial for Harp. Harp then banishes a summon Ding or Girsu, and then Girsu sends, Nightmare, and you're able to at least get into a Galatea line. The other thing I'd want is in engine. This engine's relatively weak compared to, modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! It used to be really good 4 years ago, but this engine kind of gets outclassed now. So I think one thing that kind of irks me a little bit about this deck is like I like Babel and how Babel gets you cool Ding setups, and I like Orchestrated Crescendo and the backbone of an end board that it provides for you, a nice safety blanket. But the deck rarely ends on both. The only real tool you have to search either is Galatea, and Galatea is hard once returned. So you search one, but you don't get the other. So I think that the other tool would be give ORCUST some kind of extra engine piece. It could be another extra monster. It could be a Link 3, where like once you make Galatea, you jump up into the Link 3, and then the Link 3 allows you to get the second one in rotation, right? That could be something. Or it could be a main deck tool that like it's another monster that like from graveyard it banishes to search a spell or trap, so that way it's just another through your combo. Like if you have the extra send, cool, now you also get to the other one, because like Babel's solid on its own, but it lacks like the backbone of Crescendo, and Crescendo on its own is just one interruption with one follow-up. It doesn't get you as much of the follow-up that you really want from Babel, which is really supposed to be the strength of the deck. So you really appreciate both in modern day, and the engine just doesn't facilitate it right now. So I would ideally like to see those two things. Some kind of smoothing piece in the main deck that helps smooth out just the awkward hands, just an auto 3-of in the deck that's just like awesome. We have another 3-of that's good to draw just as a starter, as a consistency card, and it helps us deal with clunky hands like drawing Harp plus Nightmare plus Symbol Skeleton. Like those really clunky hands, at least giving us a chance to deal with some of those cards. That would be super, super ideal to me. So those are the two things I'd like to see, but I'm not like an ORCUST, you know what I mean? I was never really like a huge ORCUST guy. I studied them back in 2020 when I was playing Subterror, and I actually cooked ORCUST left and right with Subterror. But I'm basically taking most of my knowledge from then, and a couple times I've looked at it since. So if you are a much bigger ORCUST fan than me, please let me know your thoughts down below on this topic. Where do you think I am? Where do you think I'm lined up in terms of my wish list on these cards? I'd love to hear where you guys come from, as somebody who plays the deck and has a much more like in-depth knowledge of the deck on what two pieces you would like to see more than anything. I know some people are also big on the idea of a Link 1. That way Harp can just actually be a 1-card combo as normal summon. But it's basically just Harp then, because Nightmare can't be normaled, right? So I don't know, outside of that exact scenario, how amazing a Link 1 actually even does for the deck. But you'd have to let me know in the comment section down below. But I'm out for today. Hopefully if we don't have any news over the next couple days, the days we don't have news, I'm going to try and get out a video on Dragon Maids and Punk as well, the other two archetypes in this product. But yeah, as for now, let me know your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear them. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.